It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I've got a special guest for you today. I hoodwinked this gentleman to convince him to meet with me, and he had his handlers connect with me and work out an opportunity for me to come to his office. I'm being funny about that, but he did have some people that represent him that also represent another individual that we're going to have here on the podcast. So it kind of worked out nicely, and I'm able to sit down with none other than Mr. Jerrmy Gawthrop. And Jerrmy he was the co-owner of the Greenhouse Grill. He is the co-owner of Woodstones Pizzeria, which has a location downtown here in Fayetteville as well as uptown. You know, they say uptown, it's like 2 miles away, but it's uptown nonetheless. And he's also the co-producer of the Fayetteville Roots Festival. And Jerrmy, we're so excited to be with you today. Thank you so much for having the podcast over to sit down and talk with you.
Well, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your background and your history and your superhero origin story. I know that you are a local, you're an NWA native. Is that correct? You're from Bella Vista and went to Bentonville High School, but tell me a little bit about you.
Sure. Thanks. I started life in Indiana.
Oh.
And then the Yankee in me transplanted to New Orleans. And so bouncing north to south, we ended up here in the middle. And yes, I did. I finished high school in Bentonville, not the Bentonville we see today.
Right.
The Bentonville of the 90s,
yes,
which was very different.
Smaller.
And then I came to Fayetteville to go to the University of Arkansas and studied advertising and public relations. And then right about the end of college, I decided I needed to hit the road and go see the world. So that's what we did, and went to lots of music festivals and camping and natural parks and national parks, and did a lot of touring and traveling. And along the way, started needing money to pay for those trips. So started selling food in the parking lots and at Red Rocks and in the campgrounds. And I had a little bit of culinary and chefiness coming from going to college and paying for my college with waiting tables, like also many people. And then also the chefs pulling me into the kitchen, like, hey, we need extra help. And
right,
you're tall. I don't know why they chose me. Anyway, I found this little love affair with the creativity, the food. I like to eat. I like the food. So I didn't go to culinary school. This was just this was imparted upon me, forced by some chefs, just like, get in here, wash the dishes, make the salad. So lo and behold, I'm on the road and I start cooking food and paying for the travels. And before long, I guess it led into this being a personal catering business that I was doing, private chefing, and then hitting the road when we did. From traveling from festivals back and forth, my business partner with the restaurants currently, back when we had no children, decided we should be throwing these festivals. So we did develop this festival that was local around here called The Great Unknown years and years ago, and years, many moon. And it was, this field festival, camping, eats, national touring acts, and it went for about 4 years. And we're not winning the money race with that one at all. And we decided, hey, let's open a restaurant. There's hundreds of dollars a year in running restaurants. So we opened a little Greenhouse Grill down here on Archibald Yell, which led to transferring it, which led to a Woodstone. And amongst having the Greenhouse Grill, we did music programming there. And my partner here, Brian, at the Roots Festival, we were friends. He was playing in the restaurant. Actually, we would pull a table out of the restaurant, the little one. From our 11 tables, we'd go to 10. And we'd brought in his band with his wife, their 9-month-old baby strapped behind her while she's playing bass. And we're just I just wanted music there, even in this little space.
Yeah.
So when we transferred to the big restaurant, we built in some stage space to have fundraisers, to host concerts, to have week music, jazz and weekend brunch music and this and that. And Brian's like, let's do a little festival here on a Sunday during brunch, and we'll do an evening show, and it's ticketed, and we'll do a little thing. I was like, yeah, let's do that. So we did the thing. We blew a water main after brunch, so we closed down, and the event went to George's. That's the history. 10 years ago, this August, that's how it the incarnation of Roots Festival. It started at the little restaurant with I don't have many acts, probably a poster in here somewhere of that. Yeah, that one of that event. And from that, we, I think, cut our teeth and people were excited. And even just for the 150 or 200 that were there, like the town needs this. We need to have more of this kind of programming and mindful like activities here. So the next year we took it to the Walton Arts Center, which is a big leap from my dining room to the Walton Arts Center. And it was a 1-day event, and then it was 2-day events. And then we were doing an opening reception at the Garner's house where there was a farm-to-table dinner and music, and then a couple nights at the Walton Arts Center. So it continued to grow until now, 10 years later, I believe that this is hard to say, but in full fruition of what we had dreamed it might have been, which is a multi-city, multi-venue, food and music on like equal platforms as far as the grandeur of the presentations, the national talent, the amount of programming, the budget spent in those two departments. It's a big story to tell, and we'll try to tip on that today. But it's in a urban environment. It's still a boutique event where there's never more than 1,500 people at any event. So you're not in the Field Festival with 30,000 or in an urban environment in some giant concrete jungle with just thousands of people. Each one has a curated boutique intimate feel. And from the main stage of the music, it's kind of like a giant house concert. It's quiet in the room. You can hear things very well, and you're so close, there's not a bad seat in the house. If you're at a tasting event, you're only feet from this national chef. You can talk to them. You've seen this guy on TV, and you're like, what are we eating today, chef? And there they are. It's not like some laundry or some super long line that you just get there and you just move on, or you can't even see him in the back. I mean, he's feet from you, or she is. And you have this intimate opportunity. So that's why we call this event an intimate urban festival. An urban fest can take lots of forms, from South by Southwest to large events that are scattered across the town. So it ends up being a big story. And I do encourage people to, pay attention to the website. You have to do a little research, because you're just not going to one spot. Here's my money. There's my wristband. I'm in.
Right.
While that exists, it's all over. We have over like 12 to 14 venues. So
yeah, you almost have to game plan it to kind of figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Each day, there's always something new to do. I mean, before we started recording, you shared just a kind of a glimpse of your schedule of the logistical aspect of what this is going to take to pull this event off. And, I think it's going to be interesting, but obviously you guys have been doing this successfully for a number of years, and you have been able to use the backdrop of Northwest Arkansas as the canvas for this event. I mean, I'm sure, and I don't know that I've read some articles from the founders of South by Southwest, and I don't know that they had ever intended it to be what it became. And you look at Austin now, and Austin's just crazy. And honestly, that's one of the contributing factors to the explosive growth of Austin. And we've got a lot of people moving here to Northwest Arkansas. One of the reasons why I created this podcast in the first place was just to kind of let people know that this is not your daddy's Arkansas. This is a different place. And again, these are all the things that I wanted to know before I moved here 5 years ago. Had no idea. Didn't know anything about the Roots Festival. Didn't know anything about half of the stuff that's going on here. But I certainly applaud you guys for, stepping out. And I think that, there's an even greater story to tell here, that sometimes, you can stumble upon some real success. And it sounds like you guys have been able to do that with this event. Why don't we just back up a little bit? Because I'd love to. There's a number of things I've kind of put down in my notes that I'd like to talk about. And just real quickly, and I read about this, you chose fish over French. Is that correct?
Fish, the band.
Yes.
Yes. And yes, I love some fish. Yes, essentially. Yeah, I'm one of those people with one class between me and the college, diploma.
Yeah.
And that was in year 2000. So it's obviously not bothered me.
Right. And let me say something just to put this out here, because I didn't want you to think I brought that up to make highlight of it. But we had another guest on the podcast recently, Bert Hanna from Hanna's Candles. I mean, multi-million-dollar company he created. He was 9 hours short of graduating from the U of A and was sitting in an accounting class, and his teacher asked him some kind of question. He was like, I would just ask my accountant that. And that was his response. And at that point, he realized, maybe I need to just go ahead and step out and do what I'm doing. And it's kind of comparable to the decision that you made. You went on tour with Fish. That opened up other doors for you and avenues, and you got a chance to see the world, I would imagine. And So that just kind of expanded your whole thought process.
It's funny that's an interesting comparison. My final class, when I had that aha moment, was, I don't even know what the class was called, but it was where you were developing your senior thesis, your big show that you jumped through all the hoops.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was developing was this company called Professional Party Planners. And I remember I was using like these really lame graphics that were available then. It's all like Microsoft DOS, I had to move dots around. So I had this little logo and things, but the ethos of the project was hire me and I will come and I'll bring food and musicians and I'll bring infrastructure and I'll help you do a thing that I didn't even know that I would ever really circulate back to. I wish I had this probably large font paper that I stretched to accomplish the grade where I touched on these things, and to see what 22-year-old me was thinking about this thing now that I do.
Right.
So it's pretty funny. So yeah, at that point, I think I realized I think I've got it. I'm good. I don't need French 4, but I do need some fish.
So you went on the road with fish.
They were one of them, for sure.
They were one of them.
Yeah.
But you had actually you kind of dabbled, like you said, you cut your teeth in the restaurant early on, where you were working with, there was a chef that pulled you into the kitchen. Were you still in high school when that happened?
No, I was going to NWAC.
Okay.
Community college.
Okay.
It was Blackboard's Cafe.
Yep.
In Bella Vista.
Okay.
And
are they still around?
The chef is, but the restaurant's not.
Okay. All right.
And in that day and age, the culinary scene in Northwest Arkansas was that establishment, and James at the Mill,
mm-hmm.
and a few other just kind of homegrown things. But there wasn't the scene we see today, obviously, as you can all imagine. But ultimately, so I felt special to get a job there as a 21-year-old because you could make some really good coin being a server. And it was serving, expensive food for the day, and still, and it holds its own in the culinary history of Northwest Arkansas. But yes, I was serving and we were short in the kitchen, and Randy's like, get in here, which was a better place to be because as a server, you got yelled at a lot. And as a kitchen guy, you're kind of one of the bros. Right. You get a little pass. Exactly. And you got, beer after the shift. Yeah. So, but yes, just the working, processing the tickets, the stress. I mean, instantly finding what the addiction is to kitchen and back of house life.
Yeah.
I was seeing it and feeling it. And then the creativity, and then we'll come up with a special. And then getting out on your own once you basically had those skills in the tool bag. And there's no culinary degree, but it was a crash course. It was Cliff Note. And it was, if you have the creativity already in you, maybe you can do this on your own. And then I started putting myself out there for events, for, my mom being hooking me up with her friends to do their Christmas event for 60, 70 people, which was great money as a single person. But then the more you put yourself out there, it's like the stress test and the stretching. And before long, you're like, I've done that. I've got more tools in the tool bag. And then before long, it was thousands of people. And then before long, it was like a restaurant.
Yeah.
And catering and weddings. And I'm retired from catering these days. After hundreds of weddings and events, I now just use those powers for other goods.
Well, I like that. I read you had made a comment about the fact that, again, you're not classically trained, but that you don't have a fear of trying new things. And just, getting out there and getting in the kitchen and improvising and doing that. I know that I like improvising myself when it comes, not necessarily to cooking, because I can cook, but when it just comes to talking and interacting with people, I feel like I can walk into any room and just shoot the stuff with anyone. But I would always fear that if I was cooking what if I just put the wrong spice or the wrong, seasoning in something and then just totally screw everything up? How did you deal with that?
We just absolutely screw up sometimes, and you learn from it. I mean, this is life. This is how we learn everything, is usually by mistakes. You don't crush things your first time.
Right.
I mean, really. And if you did, you didn't learn anything, you'll probably mess up eventually. So I think it's just it is a fearlessness to just try, and also then to be okay with failure and just kind of lean into it. I don't want to do it every time.
Yeah.
The failure part.
Exactly.
But yeah, just being okay with that. And even try and instill that in the kids, of mine, that it's like, it's okay. It's not even about the spilled milk. It's just like, you got to put yourself out there. You'll never know until you do. And after years of, I think, sometimes hitting the bottom, you mentioned the superhero story. It's awesome. Amongst that, the first day we were open, which this is a serendipitous twist. The first day we were open at the greenhouse, our very first table was a 22 top of local citizens. And it happened to be the Arcegas family coming in with their daughter who just graduated from law school. And which was pressure because, of course, I'm like, oh, I mean, some local, and now you're opening yourself up, you're putting yourself out there, and who's coming in? Well, they are, the mayor and business people and all of these people. So they're the first table. Serendipitously, many years later, the Arcegas family is who we sold the greenhouse to recently, and they're rebranding and reopening our building down there,
right?
Which is probably editable. But anyway, that fearlessness, and I put myself out there when we first opened the greenhouse. Not only did I put myself out there, but I lived in the restaurant. Like I was homeless. I lived there, or home free, as some people would put it. Mm-hmm. First 6 months that we were open, it was everything. Every hour of my life, I slept under tables 8 and 9. If you've eaten there before, and I apologize, there was a man sleeping below that table. The floor was warm. So anyway, all in. So when you're all in, you just kind of have to be fearless, because if you flop here, you're all out, and then that's no good. So it's kind of like it was all on the line.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that. I sat down with an individual that we had dinner the other night, and he was talking about the Greenhouse Grill and how much he missed it. And, he said to me, he said, man, that place, the food was just amazing. And I have to say that for all the times that I had visited Woodstone down there, and down there being right there, almost down at the bottom by MLK, where the corner where across from the CVS, and I don't know if that's South College or whatever.
Middle District.
Yeah, Middle District, whatever you want to call it. But I had visited Woodstone there several times, and I never made it to the Greenhouse Grill. And I'm really sorry to say that. And then I felt really bad when my friend was like, man, the food there was amazing.
Well, thanks, friend. Yeah.
So he said he had a lot of really good things to say about it. And I'm sure there are others. I've actually heard a few other people say, man, they missed that place. And so, is it hard to let go of something? Especially this was kind of like your baby. Was it hard to do that?
I think having real babies can help you put things in perspective.
Exactly.
And providing for them. So no, I think that while it was great, and I appreciate the positive things and people, having fond memories of it, things come to an end. And I would rather, I think Jimi Hendrix said something, let me just butcher this quote, but I'm not even going to try that quote. It's better to run something not into the ground.
Right.
But it ran its course, and we needed to do other things. Yeah. So do I miss it? Yes and no. The stress, no. Being creative in the kitchen, yes, sometimes. But the community that came there for that, and what it was in the community, you can't replace that. Right. Something else will have to step into its spot. So it opened lots of doors, and it was really awesome for when it was there. It opened, it was a place to explore culinary and to host fundraisers for people, and just to be that thing in the community. We did a lot of farm to table, sourcing and local farm support. So I think over those years, in the restaurant business, it's not like you're making pennies on the dollar. So what else does it do? Well, it is that. It's a place to commune. It's a place to kind of support your community with, the local beers we served, and that local pork, and those shiitake mushrooms, or whatever it be. Because you got to buy those somewhere. So Here we are. You can be more than just a place that's serving this food. You can help support local farms and local breweries. And you can be a place to host an event, and a place where you go with your family and create memories. That's such an interesting, there's not many businesses that I can think of that are all of those things.
Right.
I know there's more if we really racked our brains, but ultimately it's restaurants are, and institutions like that in communities, we'll call it some, are part of the fabric.
Yeah. Gathering places, if you will. So no, that's perfect. And I was reading somewhere where you had a really interesting take on the whole farm to table movement, because sometimes that language is used very loosely. And when you started kind of laying out what farm to table meant, it's not this idea that, you roll up to some guy's farm in the morning and pick up all his stuff and then bring it down and cook it all, because that's almost impossible to do. I mean, you have to get some other items from different places. Some things are not going to be able to be locally sourced. And every restaurant deals with this. But tell me, as far as you're concerned, what do you feel like farm to table means?
Today, in this day and age?
Yeah.
I think ultimately it probably still means the same thing as it did when we started. My mantra with that was we took the farm to table and a sustainable approach. So it wasn't just local, but it's trying to find clean food. And if that clean food came from Kansas or California, that still counted, and I wanted to serve that. I think, yes, farm to table has been bastardized over time, and the greenwashing. So what it means is to care about the local community and to put it first.
Yeah.
And to, when you're thinking about products that you're going to put on your menu, caring about what options are there and knowing these people and knowing that they're not just being like strawberries come from California and Mexico. Like, well, for a little slice of the year, they come from here, right down the road, and they're amazing. So you have to know, and you have to try, and you got to want it. It's not that you just wait for them to come in your door. So when we first started, I feel like there wasn't many restaurants doing this, even though we were looking at it as like in our travels, like finding it in San Francisco and Boulder and Austin, everywhere had this movement happening. It was nothing new. We were just like basically sitting around the table one day, like, why isn't there a place that we can go get just the local chicken breast on a sandwich?
Yeah.
With some kind of interesting mayo. Where's
exactly.
that? Maybe on a bun that was made at one of the bakeries, right? I mean, where is that? Bring those things together. So not to downplay it, but it seemed like a simple thing. Boy, did we figure out that it's not, that it takes a lot of logistics. And instead of getting 1 or 2 trucks rolling in and bringing all your stuff in, our inventory list of people would be, 25 contacts, phone calls, and farmers rolling in the back door after the farmer's market. Can you use the rest of these zucchini? Yes or no, and figuring those things out. So you had to kind of improv. And that was the nature, I think, of Greenhouse. A lot of the time was a rotating menu and keeping things fresh. And it's like Saturday night specials would be, well, what walked in the door earlier after the market, and try and put something together. So when you get back to like the cooking trials, we had lots of chances of like, well, we got zucchini, Napa cabbage, those tomatoes are ugly. You better make a sauce out of those. You just start building things out because you don't want to waste your money. And it was hyper fresh.
Yeah. I mean, well, and to me, I mean, I know, and there's a number of restaurants that esteem to be at that level in terms of offering you the freshest of the fresh items. And you mentioned earlier about the farmer's market. And I mean, there's a lot of good stuff around here. And I don't think people realize, I mean, this is still a fairly agrarian economy here in Arkansas. And there's a lot, like I didn't realize we're the number 2 farm raiser of catfish. I mean, that's partially some type of agrarian part of the society. And then we're also number 1 for rice, which is why the issues that we were having with China created a real problem for the people down in the southern part of the state. But I just think there's a lot. I mean, Arkansas has so much to offer. And that's why I think a lot of times when you hear that it being called the natural state, it does meet that moniker that it's been given, and normally we think of diamonds, but there's so many other diamonds that make the state so great. So,
yeah, I would agree that that's been put up on a pedestal, not in like prominence, because there's nothing always so glamorous about farming. It's very, very hard, maybe the hardest. But ultimately, with the diversity of product and then this booming culinary scene here, there's a demand for more diverse products.
Yeah.
So now we have not just eggplant, but we've got white eggplants and we've got the striped ones. So for instance, now there's like this diversity in farming techniques where they'll provide, and this spans from Fayetteville to Bentonville and everywhere around. So it's not like come to one, it's happening. You can come here and create a farm. You can enter the scene. And now we have specific mushrooms and different protein farmers. And then what I hear, and we'll see the online of, aquatic agriculture, and with, the development of things because there's enough people to support it. So back to what does farm to table mean? It doesn't mean anything unless we buy it.
Right.
It's basically just a buzzword. And I don't know if it is anymore, a buzzword. Then if you don't buy that item on the menu or care or support it and go, then there isn't one.
Yeah. Well, so tell me this, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and you've had a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. What do you think about the whole entrepreneurial scene here in Northwest Arkansas? And obviously you're cutting your teeth in it fully. You're fully involved, and you've gone from running restaurants, which you still do, to putting on huge events. What does that say about this area of the country, specifically about Northwest Arkansas, and your ability to kind of pull off what you're doing on a regular basis?
And being that you're talking about how Northwest Arkansas is for either those here or those outside of the borders of Northwest Arkansas, they're listening to this, and how it's not maybe what you think.
Right.
And sometimes it's not what you read either, because while we get lots of accolades here as top of this, and this is booming and best place to move to if you have a family and a dog, or whatever, and a canoe, those are all great and very flattering. But ultimately, what I tell people about Northwest Arkansas, and when I think about why am I here, but ultimately, I couldn't have done what I've done in a big city or a giant metro. I didn't have the deep resources, the deep pockets. a college degree, one class shy. I didn't have a lot of the things, but here, if you have the entrepreneurial spirit, the drive, and patience, and fearlessness, and all the parts of it, being a risk taker, you can do it here. It is a growing, embracing community. And if you will step into the ring and are willing to put yourself out there, you can do that here. And I don't know if that's true, because I've never tried it anywhere else, but from this festival, if you were in a big metro trying to compete with the big corporate fest and this and that, it would take a long time or just never even get off the ground.
Right.
And the same with the restaurant game. Just rent alone, let alone the food costs and finding the team and the competition of being a place and not being a trained chef or having really awesome interior and a bar program and all these things. We were just kind of, faking it till you make it and just putting ourselves out there to do it. So I think that it's thriving, and we all know that.
Yeah.
2, there's still lots and lots of room for new things. And that's a win. There's room for all kinds of new restaurants. There's room for all kinds of new businesses. And then the spin-offs and periphery of graphic design this, and I'm a networking here, and I do podcasts. There's so much room still because it's growing at a space now that it's creating gaps in services that you could provide and advertising potentials and reaching these markets, and it's not slowing down. So that's encouraging. And I think that that's just giving entrepreneurs the fuel to keep going.
Yeah. It's funny. I had Gary Head on the podcast, who is the founder of Signature Bank here in Arkansas in Fayetteville. And he was telling the story about how he got so much support from his former bosses at McElroy Bank, which became Arvest. And he was just telling me about how he raised his money to start his bank. And he basically went to the community, and the community gave back to him in a huge way. And I've heard that story over and over again. And I'm assuming you've got a lot of support from the community to kind of make it happen. Yeah. So,
that is why we're here.
Yeah.
Ultimately, because the community kept showing up even when they had a bad meal. Good days, bad days. Some people, I'm sure, have never returned after a bad meal, and that happens. But ultimately, they kept showing up. They see that this was an important thing to still be here. This is an important thing to have. This festival, this is great. That was not the best sound ever. Next year, better sound, better food, better place, better venue. The seats are more comfortable, everything. We care to pay attention to those nuances and keep investing our thought into it to make it better. And the community is throwing us a theoretical high five and yes, we want this here. And that, when we hear people say this is our festival, nothing feels better, because then it's it's showing they're showing up for it. They have a interest in just their heart and their soul. And when everybody you're at an event has that collective consciousness around them, they're happy to be here. They're proud of it. It's their festival. The vibe is elevated. You can't fake that. That's so authentic right there. You can't buy and just tell everybody before they come in, Randy, get excited.
Right.
And have yourself a great time and really turn it up. You can't do that. It's they have to do that their own.
Right.
And that vibe is created at the end of it for an encore or for the hugs you get in the field or whatever. There's no faking that.
Yeah.
And that's our community showing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's pivot a little and talk just a little bit about, before we close, just talk a little bit about this whole Roots Festival and how have you been able to amass. And I looked at the list. I just went back through it again of all the different artists, and some I had never heard of and others I have. And then of course, all the James Beard Award winners that are going to be in town. And how were you able to assemble all that? I know that just didn't happen overnight, and you've been building momentum, but what have you, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Dumb luck, Randy. No, I think it's a combination of finger on the pulse, seeing what's happening out there, asking for help, that's a tool in the tool bag that everybody should get one of, right? Which is don't be afraid to ask for help, be humble, So with that, with the music in general, so it takes a little time to you get an artist and you get two, and after a couple of years, you've worked with lots of agencies and lots of artists. And if everything was going well and they got paid, obviously, and they were treated well and the food was good backstage and this was a nice town, well, they tell their musician friends and their agents. So for long, your reputation's moving through the scene. My partner, Brian, and his wife, Bernice, they are musicians. So they're out there touring with musicians and meeting them as well and going to conventions and things to network. Ultimately, though, it's when they come here and they see our town. And our one of our slogans is a mountain town in its natural state.
Right. I like that.
So it is that. It's like you come here and this is what Fayetteville looks like. That's the food you're seeing. That's from here. This is how these are people from here. Now we do have people from like 28 states that come on the regular each year, but ultimately,
and some internationally, right?
Yes, yeah. Not as many as maybe someday. Anyway,
right.
So I think over time, that's how that reputation. Well, the same thing's been happening in the chef world. Is we had a chef, we had 2, we had 8 this year. There's I think 20 plus visiting chefs and over 50 or 60 total from around the region. So the word spread like, go, if you're ever invited, go. It's a great time. They take care of you. The food's great. And the people, the community, they're there again. They show up, they look you in the eyes, and they'll talk to you and ask you questions, and they'll appreciate what you're doing. And for an artist, that's all you want. You know you're not getting rich here.
Right.
But you just want to be heard, and you want to be seen, and you want to be validated that like, just try my thing, listen, do the, So ultimately, I feel like that just being that we're an artist driven and managed event, the musician and chef mind, it's the line items are different. The budget looks different. What we care to like put out there on a plate and on a stage is different because it's being driven by us and not, get in trouble there.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I got you.
Trim that one.
Well, for those that are listening to this podcast before the end of August of 2019, the Roots Festival event will be held the 21st through the 25th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then you can find out more about the Roots Fest at therootsfest.org. It's just
Correct.
all one word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we'll put all those notes and information in the show notes and how you can reach out to Jerrmy once you come to the event and tell him or virtually high five him and tell him how much you liked it and enjoyed it.
Hopefully so.
What's next on the plate for you? What do you want to conquer next? I mean, I know that's a loaded question, but I mean, you've kind of gotten bit by the bug of,
for sure.
So it's like, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, we've got to do something else. And it's not so much something that's got to be bigger and better than the last thing, but.
No, it isn't. I want to conquer vacation.
Okay.
With my kids. We attempted a vacation to California with all 4. And it was wonderful and challenging and everything. And it's like, okay, more of this. We need to be able to like stretch our legs and Sherpa up.
Right.
New shirt I'm going to make when I vacation.
Yeah.
Sherpa. And more time with family. I think as far as like the diversification of the portfolio of what we're doing, I know there'll be more food exploration and concepts that come as the growth happens. This festival and our production, I think that we're going to see growth, more year-round programming here at the HQ in the Geisinger building. With momentum, it can be dangerous with momentum. You could flail around, not know what to do with it, move too fast. So luckily, I think with some experience and having the bug bitten, there's also a level of patience.
Yeah.
And to do things right and be calculated with movements and then find those community wins. It's not just like we need to have this kind of event now just because we have all this momentum and capabilities and experience. It's fine tuning what we do. So next year's chef lineup, next year's musical lineup, what experiences, it's evolving from last year, not in a bigger way. There's some bigger names, but actually there's a few less tasting stations because these are different and a little bit more curated.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a fine tuning of the sound because there's not going to be making more of me.
Right.
And as we all know, time's flying.
Exactly. And, as I sit here and think, I'm sure that folks that started the Newport Jazz Festival never thought it would take off the way that it did in multiple decades.
It's a legacy now.
Yeah, it is. Montreux. I mean, anything like that is, it can take on a life of its own. And you could look at it and we could be laughing 30 years from now as your kids are running it. I mean, it could be anything. So,
And I think that's really a takeaway for me is by putting yourself out there and doing stuff is you're going to have lots of paths and careers in your life. If some have one.
Yeah.
But even talking with you earlier, you can be and do lots of things.
Absolutely.
And that's exciting for me. So what's next? I don't know, but I know there's going to be a fork in the road and I might take both paths and there'll be new things to do because it's exciting to think about that for me.
Yeah. No, I hear you 100%. And like we were saying earlier, I mean, if you had asked me even just a year ago, 6 years ago, if you had said you'd be living in Fayetteville, I would have said, get the you-know-what out of here. 1 year ago, if you'd said, you're going to be doing a podcast about all things Northwest Arkansas, I'd have been like, no, I don't think so. But here I am. So you never say never. And you just, you got to go with the flows of life. So that's a good place for us to end. And as we're ending, and I hate to put you on the spot here because you own a restaurant. And one of the things that we typically ask our guests, where do you go to eat and hang out when you aren't working and doing all the amazing things that you're doing? And certainly Woodstone would be totally acceptable as
well, I'm there plenty.
Right.
But in Fayetteville, some of my favorite spots would be like Arcega's, Minnie's, and Kana Grill and Meiji. Those are really fun, diverse places, great people, super tasty. And if I move outside of Fayetteville and I'm lucky enough to land in Rogers, I'm going to hit up Persephone on Wheels at the Fox Trail Distillery, Sidewalk, and soon I'll be able to visit my friend Jason at the Heirloom as soon as I can get there.
Yeah.
And then in Bentonville, there's so many in Bentonville, but they're doing great work. And I'm not there enough. And when I'm there, I try and like bounce around and see all of our friends and all the chef friends. And
did you get up to bite NWA at all?
We did bite on the second night.
Okay.
And
that was fun. That was my first time doing it.
To me, it was like, hey, I saw a bunch of you.
Right. Exactly.
I had to see you here where everyone came to one spot, but ultimately there was lots of high fives there. So, we're real fortunate to live in a Northwest Arkansas, quote unquote, metro growing area that has at least the arts and culinary and music scene it does for our 500,000 or whatever the population is, because there's plenty of 500,000 population metros in the country that don't have that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's like, go support them. Yeah. Here's my plug. Go eat some local restaurants. Tell the chef they did good work.
Yeah.
Throw those high fives around because it means a lot. And we got to keep supporting these things so that we can keep them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And when you're not doing anything food related or music related, how do you bide the time? Do you get out and go to the Buffalo River, or what do you?
More of that would be great. So that's back to that vacationing. Yeah. It's
you've got 4 kids. So I got 3. I know I know the situation.
I think it's the family, everything.
Yeah.
That's the rest of the time is gobbled up there, for better or worse. They love me.
Yeah. That's all you can ask for.
And I love them.
So, yeah. Well, that's good. Well, man, Jerrmy, thank you so much for agreeing to come on this podcast, especially with all that's on your plate right now. As I look through this room, and is that a mandolin over there? No,
yeah, we got a bunch of. Oh yeah, there's just antique instruments everywhere.
Yeah, you've got a little bit of everything in here, and you've got your MacBook out. I know you've got a lot of work to get back to, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the podcast, and it means the world to me every time I get to sit down with anyone here in Northwest Arkansas, because you further prove the point that there's just some amazing people here in this area. Not that there aren't in other parts of the country, but hey, you got to highlight where you are. So,
well, thank you.
And that's what I'm trying to do. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate having you. And hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation. I will, at some point in time after the Roots Festival, which I've actually volunteered to help out at, I will give my thoughts and some additional feedback on the event in a later episode. So I'll be sure to share that with you and with your audience. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Randy.
Appreciate it. Folks, there you have it. Jerrmy Gawthrop. He is the man. If you want some great, amazing pizza, he's got 2 locations at Woodstone, uptown, right downtown as well. And also, if you're in or around the Northwest Arkansas area, August 21st through 25th of 2019, you've got to check out the Fayetteville Roots Festival. It will be amazing. Just visit therootsfest.org. And even if it's after that date, check out the dates for next year so you can book your tickets for it, mark it on the calendar so that you can be a part of what Jerremy's talking about and what he's doing here and the change that he's making right here in Northwest Arkansas. So listen, I appreciate you taking time out. I know that you could be doing a lot of different things, but you've chosen to listen to this podcast today. So I really appreciate it, whether you're out on a run, whether you're commuting to work, or whatever you're doing. We appreciate you taking time out to listen to I Am Northwest Arkansas. You can check us out wherever fine podcasts can be found. And if you get a chance, we would love for you to give us a review. A 5-star review would be great, but just give us a review nonetheless. Let us know how we're doing. If we're not doing well, let us know that too so that we can improve. We can only do that with your feedback. So that's it. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I will see you next week.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.